It begins with the cold, metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut. A respected, law-abiding man stands humiliated on his own front porch, while two arrogant officers smirk, convinced they have just caught a brazen burglar in the act. They never bothered to verify the address. They never bothered to check his identification. And when the chief of police hears the suspect's name crackle over the radio, he does not simply drive to the scene. He races there in a blind, cold panic, sweat prickling his skin. Because these two officers have not just arrested an innocent man, they have handcuffed the one person who now holds the power to tear their entire department apart. It was a crisp autumn evening in the affluent, meticulously manicured neighborhood of Crestwood Hills, Illinois. Towering oak trees lined the quiet streets, and the driveways held gleaming imported sedans. This was the kind of place where people paid dearly for silence, security, and predictability. Marcus Ellison loved that quiet. A distinguished man who had built a formidable career in law and public service over many years, he commanded respect in courtrooms and boardrooms alike. Tall, with broad shoulders and distinguished graying temples, Marcus had recently moved into 442 Oakwood Drive. The boxes inside the sprawling four-bedroom colonial were still barely unpacked. That evening, Marcus stepped outside in a cashmere sweater and tailored slacks to retrieve a package left at the edge of his property. When he turned to go back inside, the state-of-the-art smart lock on his custom mahogany door had malfunctioned. A blinking red light mocked him as he tapped the code. The mechanism was jammed. Frustrated, he sighed, set the package down, and pulled a small flathead screwdriver from his pocket, a habit from his younger days working on old cars. He crouched by the door, gently prying at the battery casing to reset the system. It was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. He did not notice the twitching curtains across the street. Helen Pritchard, the neighborhood watch captain who had lived in Crestwood Hills for many years, watched him through high-end binoculars. She prided herself on knowing exactly who belonged in her neighborhood. She had not seen any moving trucks arrive recently. All she saw now was a tall black man in dark clothing crouching at the front door of the supposedly vacant property, appearing to pick the lock. She did not hesitate. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, police. I need to report a break-in in progress," she whispered, her voice trembling with manufactured urgency. 442 Oakwood Drive. There is a man trying to break into the house right now. He has a tool. You need to hurry before he gets inside. Nearby, Patrol Car 47 was finishing a routine traffic stop. Inside sat Officer Derek Rollins, a seasoned veteran whose aggressive arrogance often masked deep insecurities, and Officer Brandon Cole, a young officer fresh from the academy and desperate to earn Rollins's approval. When the dispatch call came through, burglary in progress at 442 Oakwood Drive, Rollins slammed his foot on the gas. "Finally, some real action," Rollins muttered as the siren wailed and they tore through the quiet streets. Back on the porch, Marcus had just managed to pop the casing off the smart lock. He removed the batteries, waited a moment, and replaced them. A satisfying green light glowed on the keypad. He smiled, stood up, and dusted off his knees. He reached for the handle. Suddenly, the blinding glare of a police spotlight washed over him, casting harsh shadows against the brick of his home. The screech of tires echoed as the cruiser hopped the curb and stopped aggressively at the end of his driveway. "Step away from the door. Hands where I can see them. Now." The voice boomed through the PA system. Marcus turned, shielding his eyes. Two silhouettes stepped out of the cruiser, hands resting on their holstered weapons. His pulse spiked, but decades of legal training took over. He knew the statistics. He knew how quickly a misunderstanding could turn fatal. He took a slow, deliberate breath and kept his movements smooth and visible. "Good evening, officers," Marcus said, his voice calm, resonant, and steady. He raised his hands to chest level, palms open. "There's no problem here. I'm just fixing my lock." "I said step away from the door," Rollins barked, unholstering his taser and advancing up the walkway. Cole flanked him, hands still on his sidearm, looking nervous. "Get down the stairs, now!" "Officers, I am the homeowner," Marcus replied, taking one slow step down to comply. "My name is Marcus Ellison. I live here. My ID is in my back right pocket." Rollins scoffed, a nasty, cynical sound. "Yeah, right. Homeowner. Down on the ground. Interlace your fingers behind your head." Marcus stopped on the bottom step. His calm demeanor held, but his eyes hardened. "Officer, I am complying with your orders, but I will not lie in the dirt of my own front yard. I have identified myself. I have offered you my identification. I suggest you take a moment to de-escalate and verify my residence."
"You don't give the orders here, pal,"
Rollins sneered, closing the distance. He grabbed Marcus's left arm with violent force, yanking him off balance. The contact was entirely unjustified. Marcus stumbled but caught himself, his heavy frame refusing to be easily manhandled. That passive resistance triggered something dark in Rollins. "Stop resisting!" Rollins yelled, the familiar battle cry of an officer looking for an excuse to escalate. "I am not resisting," Marcus said firmly, though his heart now hammered against his ribs. "You are assaulting me on my own property." Cole rushed in and grabbed Marcus's other arm. Together they shoved the man face first against the hood of his own charcoal gray Mercedes-Benz S-Class parked in the driveway. The impact knocked the wind out of him. The cold metal bit into his cheek. Neighbors began emerging from their homes. Porch lights flicked on up and down the street. Helen Pritchard stood at the edge of her lawn, arms crossed, watching with a satisfied smirk as the police handled the threat. Other neighbors, people Marcus had not yet met, pulled out their phones to record. "Legs apart," Rollins commanded, kicking Marcus's ankles apart. He dug his knee into Marcus's lower back, pressing him painfully against the car. "Check his pockets, Cole. See what he stole." "I stole nothing," Marcus said, his voice slightly muffled but eerily composed. "My wallet is in my back right pocket. My driver's license will show this address. The keys to this vehicle are in my left pocket." Cole hesitated, then reached into Marcus's back pocket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet. He flipped it open and squinted in the dim light. Rollins. His ID says Marcus Ellison. The address matches." Rollins did not ease the pressure on Marcus's spine. "It's a fake, or he stole the wallet from the homeowner and is using it to cover his tracks. You think I'm stupid? Guys like this don't live in houses like this." Marcus closed his eyes. The sheer, unadulterated ignorance of the statement hung in the cool air. With a brutal yank, Rollins pulled Marcus's arms behind his back. The cold, heavy steel of the handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists, ratcheted too tight, biting instantly into the skin. "You're under arrest for attempted burglary, trespassing, and resisting arrest," Rollins said, leaning down so his hot breath ghosted across Marcus's ear. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." They hauled Marcus upright. He stood handcuffed in his own driveway, illuminated by the cruiser's flashing lights. He looked at the small crowd of neighbors. Some appeared concerned. Others looked validated. The humiliation pressed down on his chest like a physical weight, but beneath it, a cold, calculated fury began to take root. Marcus looked directly at Officer Rollins. The man was grinning, proud of his collar. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a chilling authority that made Cole flinch. "I'm going to give you one chance. Look at the ID again. Run my name through your system. Take these handcuffs off me, apologize, and leave my property. If you do not, I promise you will no longer have a career in law enforcement." Rollins laughed, a loud, abrasive sound that echoed down the street. "Oh, I'm shaking. What are you going to do, sue me? Get in line, buddy. I've dealt with 100 loudmouths like you. You're going to a holding cell." "I am not a loudmouth," Marcus said softly, his eyes boring into Rollins. "I am a man who understands exactly how the system works, and you, officer, have just made a catastrophic error."
"Get him in the back of the car,"
Rollins told Cole, ignoring the warning completely. Cole grabbed Marcus by the arm and escorted him toward the cruiser. Before putting him inside, Cole pressed the button on his shoulder radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. We have one in custody at 442 Oakwood Drive. Suspect is secured, requesting a transport van." Copy, 47. Can I get a name on the suspect? Rollins grabbed his own radio. Yeah, dispatch. Suspect is claiming the name Marcus Ellison. Probably an alias. We're bringing him in for processing. There was a long, heavy pause on the radio. Then the dispatcher's voice returned, noticeably tense.
Unit 47, please repeat the suspect's name. Marcus Ellison,
Rollins said, rolling his eyes.
Ellison. What's the holdup?
Another pause. Unit 47, hold your position. Do not transport. The chief is getting on the radio. Rollins frowned and exchanged a confused look with Cole.
The chief? What the hell does Chief Henderson care about a burglary suspect?
Nearby, in the dim wood-paneled corner booth of Ollie's Diner, Chief Walter Henderson was nursing a black coffee and a raging headache. Henderson had been chief of the Crestwood Hills Police Department for years. Lately, his job had become a nightmare. The state government had recently cracked down on municipal police departments, launching investigations into civil rights violations, excessive force, and corruption. Crestwood Hills was squarely in the crosshairs. Recently, the governor had appointed a new, highly feared special prosecutor with absolute authority to audit local departments and bring down the hammer on misconduct. Henderson had been sweating bullets. He knew his department was not clean. He knew he had officers like Derek Rollins who were walking liabilities. He had been warned that the new special prosecutor was relocating to the area to begin a deep investigation. One high-profile mistake, and the state would take over the department. The radio on his belt squawked. The address caught his ear. One in custody at 442 Oakwood Drive. Henderson frowned and set his coffee down. He knew that address. The mayor had personally called him recently to inform him that the city had arranged high-end residential security for a VIP moving into that exact property, a corporate lease paid for by the state attorney general's office. Henderson grabbed his radio and listened as Rollins's voice came through. Suspect is claiming the name Marcus Ellison. The blood drained from Chief Henderson's face. His stomach plummeted. A cold, icy dread seized his chest. Marcus Ellison, the newly appointed special prosecutor, the man holding the keys to the entire department's future, the man who had taken down corrupt police forces in major cities, and his idiot patrol officers had him in handcuffs. Henderson did not even bother to key his mic at first. He scrambled out of the booth, threw money on the table, and sprinted to his unmarked SUV. He fired up the engine, flipped on the emergency lights and sirens, and tore out of the parking lot so fast the tires smoked.
Unit 47, this is Chief Henderson,
he barked into the radio, his voice cracking with raw panic.
Do not move. Do not put that man in the vehicle. Do not speak to him. If you have a hand on him, take it off right now. I am on my way. You hold your goddamn position.
Back at Oakwood Drive, Rollins stared at his radio in shock.
The chief?
Cole whispered, his face pale. Why is the chief screaming?
I don't know,
Rollins stammered, his arrogant bravado evaporating. He looked from the radio to Marcus, still standing handcuffed by the cruiser. Marcus offered him a cold, humorless smile. I believe your time is up, officer.
Shut up,
Rollins snapped, though his voice lacked venom. Doubt crept in, insidious and terrifying. He snatched the wallet from Cole and looked closely at the driver's license. The picture matched. The address matched. He pulled out a shiny silver credentials card tucked behind it. Marcus A. Ellison, Special Prosecutor, Office of the Attorney General. Rollins felt his knees go weak. The color drained from his cheeks. He looked up at Marcus, jaw hanging open.
You're...
I told you who I was, Marcus said softly, the flashing lights reflecting in his steady eyes. And I told you what was going to happen. For several agonizing minutes, the street was silent, save for the idling engine of the cruiser. Neighbors continued watching, confused by the sudden standstill. Rollins and Cole stood frozen, terrified to move or speak. Rollins's hand hovered over the handcuff keys, but the chief's orders had been absolute. Do not move. Do not touch him. Then the wail of a siren pierced the night, louder, faster, more frantic than a standard response. A black SUV with hidden strobes blazing tore around the corner and slammed to a halt at a harsh angle behind the patrol car. The door flew open before the vehicle fully stopped. Chief Walter Henderson practically fell out, breathless, tie askew, face a mottled, terrifying shade of crimson. He sprinted up the driveway, completely ignoring his two officers, and stopped directly in front of Marcus Ellison. Henderson looked at the handcuffs biting into Marcus's wrists. He looked at the dirt on the cashmere sweater. He looked at the red mark on Marcus's cheek where Rollins had slammed him against the car. Henderson closed his eyes and let out a ragged, shaking breath. He knew with absolute certainty that his career and the reputation of his entire department had just ended. "Mr. Ellison," Chief Henderson whispered, his voice trembling with profound apology and sheer terror. "Sir, my God, I am so sorry." The silence on Oakwood Drive was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the cruiser's engine and the frantic breathing of Officer Derek Rollins. Chief Henderson stood frozen on the walkway, eyes locked on the heavy steel cuffs binding Marcus Ellison's wrists. The gravity of the situation crushed him. He was a veteran who had navigated political minefields for years, but looking at the special prosecutor bleeding slightly onto his own driveway, he knew there was no spinning this. This was catastrophic failure. Henderson turned his head slowly. The look he gave Officer Rollins possessed lethal intensity. The look of a man watching his pension, reputation, and legacy burn to ash. "The keys," Henderson demanded, voice a low, terrifying rasp. "Give me the keys right now." Rollins' hands shook so violently he could barely operate his duty belt. He fumbled, dropped the small metal key onto the driveway, and scrambled to pick it up, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "Chief, we got a call," Rollins stammered, his swagger replaced by the whimper of a man realizing his life was over. "Dispatch said burglary in progress. He was at the door." "Shut your mouth," Henderson snarled, snatching the key. He shoved the patrolman aside with enough force to make him stumble, then stepped cautiously behind Marcus. "Mr. Ellison, sir, I am taking these off," Henderson said, hands visibly shaking as he inserted the key. Click, click, the steel jaws released. Marcus brought his arms forward slowly, wincing as blood flowed back into his hands. Deep, angry red indentations circled his wrists. He rubbed them methodically, then turned to face the three officers. "Chief Henderson," Marcus said. His voice was perfectly level, devoid of shouting, yet it cut through the night like a scalpel. "I assume you're aware of who I am." "Yes, sir, I am," Henderson replied, swallowing hard. "And I cannot begin to express how profoundly sorry I am for this catastrophic misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding," Marcus corrected, adjusting the cuffs of his sweater. "A misunderstanding is a misread address. A misunderstanding is a polite inquiry. What happened here was a blatant, aggressive violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. A Terry stop executed without reasonable suspicion, followed immediately by excessive force, false imprisonment, and battery." Marcus took a step forward. Rollins instinctively stepped back, hiding behind the chief. "I identified myself immediately," Marcus continued, eyes drilling into Rollins. "I informed your officer of my address. I offered my identification. In response, I was assaulted, slammed against my own vehicle, and mocked." Before Henderson could respond, a high-pitched, self-righteous voice broke the tension. "Well, it's about time someone did something about the crime in this area." From the edge of the property line, Helen Pritchard marched up the driveway in a quilted robe, clutching her smartphone like a medal. She had seen the chief arrive and assumed he was there to congratulate the officers. "I'm the one who called 911, Chief," she announced proudly. "I saw him picking the lock. I knew he didn't belong here." "Good job, boys. We have to keep our neighborhood safe." Chief Henderson looked at her in pure disbelief. He opened his mouth to order her back inside before she made things worse, but Marcus raised a single hand, stopping him. Marcus turned to the neighbor and offered a polite, terrifyingly calm smile. "Good evening, ma'am. I am Marcus Ellison. I purchased this property recently. I moved in a short time ago." Helen Pritchard's triumphant smile faltered. She blinked, looking from Marcus to the cruiser to the chief, who looked as though he might be physically sick. That's impossible, she stammered. The previous owners moved out. I didn't see moving trucks. My relocation was handled privately due to the sensitive nature of my employment with the state, Marcus replied, stepping toward her. The authority radiating from him made her shrink back. And you are the one who initiated the emergency response. I thought you were a burglar, she squeaked, bravado evaporating. Because I was fixing a jammed smart lock on my own front door? Marcus asked, tone inquisitive but laced with legal peril. Or because I'm a black man standing in Crestwood Hills? Helen gasped, clutching at her robe in a gesture so cliché it almost made Marcus laugh. It has everything to do with it, Marcus said, voice dropping to a frigid whisper. You bypassed a non-emergency inquiry and escalated directly to a 911 dispatch, providing false information of a crime in progress. Your reckless assumption facilitated a gross civil rights violation. Marcus turned back to Chief Henderson, pointing at Helen. Chief, please ensure this woman's information is recorded. I will be subpoenaing the 911 dispatch audio. She is now a material witness in a federal civil rights inquiry, and I intend to explore civil litigation against her for initiating a false police report that resulted in my physical injury. Helen let out a sharp, panicked gasp. Civil litigation? You can't sue me. I was protecting the neighborhood. You will be hearing from my attorneys, Marcus said dismissively, turning his back on her completely. Helen stood frozen for a second, then spun and speed-walked back to her house in absolute terror. Marcus looked at the two patrol officers. Brandon Cole looked as though he might cry. Derek Rollins looked like a man standing on the gallows. Officers, Marcus said, get off my property. Rollins did not need to be told twice. He turned, grabbed Cole's sleeve, and hurried toward the patrol car. Not you, Chief, Marcus said softly as Henderson began to turn. You and I are going to step inside. We have a great deal to discuss. The interior of 442 Oakwood Drive was a stark contrast to the violence outside. Impeccably designed, minimalist, elegant, with dark hardwood floors, vaulted ceilings, and abstract art on pristine white walls. The scent of expensive cedar and fresh paint lingered. Chief Henderson stood awkwardly in the grand foyer, feeling distinctly out of place in his rumpled uniform. He watched as Marcus walked to a wet bar, poured himself sparkling water, and took a long, deliberate sip. Marcus did not offer the chief a drink. He did not ask him to sit. Mr. Ellison, Henderson began desperately, I want to assure you personally that Officer Rollins will be suspended without pay effective immediately. By morning, I will have his badge on my desk. He will be terminated. Officer Cole will face severe disciplinary action and retraining. I will personally oversee— Stop talking, Chief, Marcus interrupted, tone conversational but absolute. Henderson snapped his mouth shut. Marcus walked to the glass-topped dining table and rested his hands on it, leaning forward slightly. The chandelier cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting the bruise forming on his left cheekbone. Do you think I care about Derek Rollins? Marcus asked, tilting his head. Do you think firing one arrogant, hot-headed patrolman solves the problem? Henderson swallowed hard. Sir, it was an isolated incident of poor judgment. Do not insult my intelligence, Marcus snapped. I have been reviewing the internal data of the Crestwood Hills Police Department. I was sent by the Attorney General because your department's use of force complaints have spiked dramatically. Your traffic stop disparities are statistically indefensible, and your Internal Affairs Division clears nearly every civilian complaint without disciplinary action. Marcus took a step closer. Rollins is not an anomaly, Walter. He is the culture. A culture you cultivated. A culture you protected. He felt entirely comfortable assaulting a man who was completely compliant, who had already provided identification. Why? Because he knew you wouldn't punish him. Because he's done it before, hasn't he? Henderson's silence was deafening confirmation. I moved here quietly, Marcus continued, pacing slowly around the edge of the table like a predator. I wanted to observe your department from the ground up before I initiated my formal audit. I wanted to see how this city operates when it thinks nobody is watching. Well, I got my answer very soon after arriving. Mr. Ellison, please, Henderson pleaded, hands sweating. If you take this public, if the Attorney General uses this to justify a federal consent decree, it will destroy the city. The mayor will gut the department. Morale will collapse. Morale? Marcus laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You're worried about the morale of men who slam innocent homeowners against cars. Let me tell you what is going to happen, Chief. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and placed it face up on the table. That is a draft of the preliminary injunction I was preparing to file. But tonight you gave me a gift. A horrible, painful, humiliating gift. You gave me undeniable, first-hand, irrefutable evidence of systematic constitutional violations. The chief stared at the phone as if it were a live grenade. But here's the twist, Chief Henderson, Marcus said, leaning in close. I don't just want a consent decree. Consent decrees take time. They get bogged down. I want immediate structural decapitation of your toxic command staff. And I have the leverage to get it. Marcus's eyes locked onto Henderson's. I know about the Hastings internal audit. Henderson physically recoiled. The color vanished from his face. The Hastings audit was a highly classified internal review regarding the disappearance of $40,000 from the department's evidence locker, money tied to a local narcotics ring. The audit had implicated 2 senior captains, both of whom were Henderson's closest friends. Henderson had buried the report to save his command staff, citing inconclusive findings. How could you possibly know about that? Henderson whispered.
I am the special prosecutor, Marcus reminded him coldly. I don't knock on the front door. I come through the floorboards. I was going to use the audit to force your resignation, but after what your officers did to me tonight, the timeline accelerated. Marcus picked up his water glass and took another sip, letting the chief twist. Here is your ultimatum, Walter. Non-negotiable. 1. Rollins is terminated first thing in the morning, not suspended pending investigation. Terminated. I will personally file criminal battery charges against him with the district attorney. You will not protect him. Henderson nodded numbly. 2. You will mandate the immediate implementation of the civilian oversight board the mayor has been requesting, and you will grant them full subpoena power over your internal affairs division. The union will strike, Henderson protested weakly. Let them, Marcus countered instantly. Because if they do, 3 goes into effect. I will hold a press conference on my front lawn. I will release the body cam footage of my assault. I will release the 911 audio. I will release the findings of your racially biased traffic stops. And I will release the unredacted Hastings audit detailing how you, Chief Henderson, covered up felony theft by your own captains. Henderson grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. He was trapped in a perfect, inescapable checkmate. You're dismantling my department, he said, voice hollow. I am performing a necessary amputation to save the patient, Marcus corrected. You built a department that operates on arrogance and impunity. Tonight you found out what happens when that impunity collides with someone who has the power to fight back. Most people Rollins slams against a hood don't have a badge shinier than his. I do. Marcus walked to the front door and opened it. The cold night air rushed in. The cruiser was still parked at the end of the driveway, lights now off. Rollins and Cole stood waiting. You have until morning to issue the termination papers and sign the oversight agreement, Marcus said, holding the door open. If I do not hear from you soon, I call the press and I call the FBI. Henderson walked slowly toward the door, looking as though he had aged years in minutes. He stopped in the threshold. I thought I was a good cop, Mr. Ellison, he whispered, a hint of genuine despair in his voice. Somewhere along the line, I just wanted to protect my guys. Your job was to protect the public, Marcus said softly, tone devoid of sympathy. You forgot the difference. Good night, Chief. Marcus closed the heavy mahogany door. The smart lock clicked, flashing secure green. Outside, Chief Henderson walked slowly down the driveway. Rollins stepped forward, face tight with frantic hope. Chief, Rollins asked, voice cracking. What did he say? Are we okay? Henderson stopped.
He looked at Rollins, the hot-headed patrolman who had just burned down his entire world. A surge of rage rose in him, but it was not directed only at Rollins. It was directed at himself. "Give me your badge, Derek," Henderson said, voice dead and empty. "And your weapon. You're done." Early the next morning, the squad room smelled of stale coffee and old floor wax. Inside Chief Henderson's glass-walled office, the air was suffocating. Officer Derek Rollins, stripped of his duty belt but still in uniform, paced like a caged animal. Beside him stood Victor Harlan, the heavyset president of the local police benevolent association. Leaning against the filing cabinet with arms crossed was Captain Leonard Shaw, one of the two senior officers implicated in the buried Hastings audit. Henderson had just finished explaining the ultimatum Marcus Ellison had laid out. He watched panic and rage wash over the three men. "You've got to be kidding me, Walter," Harlan spat, slamming a fist onto the desk. "You're going to let some suit from the Attorney General's office come into our town, dictate our personnel, and mandate a civilian oversight board over a bruised wrist and a hurt ego? Absolutely not. The union will walk out." "It's not just a bruised wrist, Victor," Henderson fired back, eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. "It's false arrest, battery, and a massive civil rights violation on the special prosecutor sent here specifically to look for an excuse to gut us. He has the body cam footage. He has the 911 audio." "So what?" Rollins sneered. "The guy got aggressive. He resisted. I used standard compliance techniques. The neighbor called it in as a burglary. We acted on good faith. Any judge will throw out his little civil suit." "He doesn't need a county judge, Derek," Henderson groaned. "He has the FBI on speed dial. And he's not just threatening you. He's threatening all of us. He knows about the Hastings audit." Captain Shaw, who had been silent until that moment, suddenly stood up straight, color draining from his face. He knows about the 40,000? "He knows everything," Henderson said softly. "He told me he'll release the unredacted audit to the press if I don't fire Rollins and sign the oversight agreement. If he does that, you and Captain Greer are looking at federal indictments for theft, and I'm looking at serious federal time for conspiracy and obstruction." The room plunged into chilling silence. The bravado evaporated from Harlan's face. He looked at Shaw, then at Henderson, suddenly realizing this was about survival. But Derek Rollins was not going down quietly. The narcissism that made him a terror on the streets now made him a cornered rat.
"No,"
Rollins said, voice trembling with dark, venomous rage. "No, I am not being the sacrificial lamb for your dirty money, Chief." "Gary, Derek, it's over," Henderson pleaded. "I'll make sure the union gets you a quiet severance package, but you have to turn in your resignation."
"Screw your severance package,"
Rollins shouted, stepping right up to the chief's desk. "You think you can just burn me to save your own skin? Let me tell you how this is going to go. When you buried that audit, you and Captain Shaw had a lovely little conversation in a squad car about how you were going to alter the evidence logs. You thought the dashcam audio was off. It wasn't. I was the one who checked the car back into the motor pool. I pulled the memory card. I've had it in a safe deposit box ever since." Henderson froze. The breath left his lungs in a sharp hiss. Captain Shaw physically stumbled backward, hitting the filing cabinet.
You recorded us?"
Shaw stammered, eyes wide with terror. "I took an insurance policy," Rollins smiled, a sick, desperate grin. "So here is my ultimatum, Chief. You don't fire me. You tell this Ellison guy to go to hell. If he releases his audit, I release the audio of you and Shaw committing a felony. If I go down, I am taking the entire command staff with me. Do we understand each other?" Rollins did not wait for an answer. He turned and stormed out, slamming the glass door so hard it rattled. Inside the office, Harlan let out a long, low whistle. "Well, Walter, looks like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place." Henderson sank into his leather chair. Time was slipping away, and now his own patrolman was holding a loaded gun to his head. The chief looked at his shaking hands. The empire of corruption and protection he had spent years building was collapsing inward, crushing him. Later that morning, Marcus Ellison sat in the sunlit breakfast nook of his new home, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. A steaming cup of Earl Grey tea sat beside a stack of crisp legal documents. His tablet streamed the local morning news. His phone buzzed with a Google alert for his own name. Marcus tapped the notification. It linked to the Crestwood Daily Tribune's breaking news blog. The headline read, "Exclusive. Anonymous police source claims incoming state prosecutor used political clout to avoid arrest. Threatens local cops." Marcus read the article with a serene, terrifyingly calm expression. Clearly fed to a friendly reporter by Derek Rollins, it painted a wild narrative. Police had responded to a legitimate burglary call. The suspect, Ellison, had become violently uncooperative, verbally abused the officers, and then used his state connections to blackmail the chief into dropping charges and forcing a good cop off the force. Marcus set the phone down and took a slow sip of tea. He was not angry. He was deeply, profoundly satisfied. He had known Derek Rollins was a narcissist. He had profiled the man's disciplinary file. Narcissists never accept defeat. They always try to control the narrative. Marcus had banked on Rollins doing something incredibly stupid, and the patrolman had just handed him the final nail for the department's coffin. Moments later, a black SUV pulled into Marcus's driveway. Through the window, Marcus watched Chief Henderson walk up the path. The chief looked like a dead man walking, shoulders slumped, face ashen. Marcus opened the front door before Henderson could knock. "Mr. Ellison," Henderson rasped, holding out a manila folder, hand trembling. "Here it is. Rollins' termination papers signed, and the mayoral agreement for the Civilian Oversight Board with full subpoena power signed by me and the union president. We met your demands." Marcus looked at the folder but did not take it. Instead, he held up his tablet, showing the chief the headline from the Tribune. Henderson squinted at the screen. As he read, the last remnants of hope drained from his eyes. No, I didn't authorize this. Rollins went rogue." "Your demands were simple, Walter," Marcus said, voice cold and unforgiving. "Fire the officer, sign the agreement, and we handle this quietly. But your man couldn't keep his mouth shut. He tried to smear my name in the press to save his own skin." "Please," Henderson begged, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "I gave you what you wanted. Rollins has dashcam audio of me, of a mistake I made years ago. He blackmailed me this morning. I pushed his termination through anyway. I fell on my sword for you." "You didn't fall on your sword for me," Marcus corrected sharply. "You did it because you were out of options. But the deal was absolute compliance and silence. Rollins broke the silence, which means the deal is void." "What are you going to do?" Henderson whispered. "What I came to this city to do," Marcus replied. "I suggest you go back to your precinct and call a lawyer. A very good one." Marcus closed the door in the chief's face. At midday, the front lawn of 442 Oakwood Drive was transformed. News vans from every major network in Chicago and the surrounding suburbs had descended upon the quiet neighborhood. Microphones clustered around a podium set up in the driveway. Neighbors, including a horrified and deeply embarrassed Helen Pritchard, watched from their porches as state troopers secured the perimeter. Soon after, Marcus Ellison stepped up to the podium. The cameras flashed, bright lights reflecting off his immaculate suit. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his resonant voice commanding absolute silence. "I recently moved into this neighborhood to begin my tenure as special prosecutor for the state attorney general. Last night, while attempting to fix a broken lock on my own front door, I was racially profiled, falsely accused, and brutally assaulted by officers of the Crestwood Hills Police Department." A murmur rippled through the reporters. "However," Marcus continued, eyes scanning the cameras, "this press conference is not about me. What happened to me is merely a symptom of a malignant disease rotting the core of this city's law enforcement." Marcus signaled to a technician. The screen behind him flickered to life, playing the body cam footage of Derek Rollins slamming Marcus against the Mercedes. The audio of the 911 call played simultaneously, Helen Pritchard's frantic, baseless accusations ringing out for the world to hear. The reporters gasped. It was undeniable, visceral proof. Officer Derek Rollins, The man in that video attempted to leak a false narrative to the press this morning, claiming I was the aggressor, Marcus announced, holding up a stack of documents. But Officer Rollins is the least of this city's problems, because the corruption does not end on the streets. It goes all the way to the chief's office. Marcus held up the thick-bound copy of the Hastings audit. This is an internal audit buried by Chief Walter Henderson. It details the systemic theft of $40,000 from the narcotics evidence locker orchestrated by Captain Leonard Shaw and other members of the command staff. Chief Henderson concealed this felony to protect his friends. The press corps erupted into a frenzy of shouted questions.
Effective immediately,
Marcus stated, raising his voice over the chaos. I am filing federal civil rights and criminal battery charges against Derek Rollins. I am officially handing the Hastings audit over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I am filing an emergency petition with the state Supreme Court to place the Crestwood Hills Police Department under immediate federal receivership. As Marcus spoke, the cameras caught 3 black FBI vehicles rolling slowly toward the precinct downtown.
No one is above the law,
Marcus concluded, looking directly into the main broadcast camera, a promise etched into his unyielding expression. Especially not those who wear a badge to enforce it. Thank you. By mid-afternoon, Chief Walter Henderson and Captain Leonard Shaw were walked out of the precinct in handcuffs by federal agents. Shortly after, Derek Rollins was arrested at his home, crying as the metal cuffs snapped around his wrists, a sharp, ironic echo of the pain he had inflicted the night before. As evening fell over Crestwood Hills, the neighborhood was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Helen Pritchard's curtains remained firmly drawn, her reign of paranoid suspicion permanently shattered. The residents who had watched the abuse in silence now realized that accountability had finally moved in next door. Marcus Ellison sat on his porch, watching the twilight settle. The smart lock glowed a peaceful green. The battle for the city had just begun, but the first strike was a flawless, devastating victory. He took a sip of his tea, finally enjoying the quiet. The abuse of power thrives in the dark, relying on silence and fear to protect those who wear the badge as a shield for their own ego. But as this story proves, true authority doesn't come from a uniform or a pair of handcuffs. It comes from the relentless, uncompromising pursuit of justice. Marcus Ellison turned his darkest moment into a masterclass on dismantling a corrupt system from the inside out. If this story of accountability and triumph had your heart pounding, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with your friends to spread the message, and subscribe to our channel for more intense real-life drama stories where justice always gets the final word.